Welcome to Apologetics from the Attic, the show that seeks to teach and defend the Christian faith in a post-Christian culture. And now, broadcasting from an attic in an undisclosed location somewhere outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, here is your host, Dave Lewis. Hey everyone, how's everyone? Welcome to another episode. And today I'm going to cover a topic that I've been reluctant to cover. But a couple things happened recently. I saw a couple videos that I thought were worth looking at as a springboard into the topic. And the topic is Christian nationalism. And you'll hear a lot more of it this year, because especially the Democrats are going to say that Donald Trump is a Christian nationalist. There's a bunch of right-wingers who are Christian nationalists, and they're a threat to America and all this type of stuff. But we want to see what Christian nationalism is, and I think the best way to introduce ourselves to it is to see. So this is presbycast. If you're not familiar with what presbycast is, it's a really good podcast put out by PCA Presbyterian guys. And I switched over to YouTube there if you're watching. And they had a discussion recently with the author of The Case for Christian Nationalism, Stephen Wolfe, Daryl Hart, who I believe is a professor at Grove City College, or not Grove City College. Let's look up where he is real quick. Daryl G. Hart. Sorry, I should have. Hillsdale College. He's a professor at Hillsdale College, professor of history. So he's on there, and it's him and Brad, who's the host of presbycast. They are arguing against Christian nationalism. Then you have this guy Miles, who's an Anglican, and then Stephen Wolfe, and then this guy Timon Klein. Who is he? I should have looked this stuff up earlier, but didn't really have the time. Timon Klein, he American Reformer. He's with the American Reformer. Okay, and he's pro Christian nationalism as well. And, Christian nationalism is basically this idea that we need to, the problem with America is we've lost the morality that comes from Christianity, and that morality needs to be placed back onto the nation. And how do we do that? Well, this is where the debate comes in. Because I think most Christians think it's a positive thing for Christian morality to be the backbone of any nation. But how do we accomplish that? And so Christian nationalists think we should use political power, coercive force to do that. Now, some will deny that. That's the whole point. So let's just jump into this. Now, I want you to see, this would take too much time, but just study it on your own. Chapter 23, paragraph 3 of the Westminster Confession, right? And it's on the screen there. The original is on the left, which I think the RPCNA, for example, Reformed Presbyterian Church North America, still has the original about the civil magistrate. It's the article about the civil magistrate. And then a completely rewritten one that I think is in most other Presbyterian churches, the PCA for sure. And the power of the civil magistrate on the left is really, telling you that the civil magistrate should suppress all blasphemies and heresies, all corruptions, abuse of worship and discipline, et cetera, et cetera. The actual civil magistrate should do that by force of their power that they're given. Whereas the revised one says that civil magistrate should not do that, basically. That the civil magistrate should protect the person and good name of all their people. No person should be suffered under pretense of religion or infidelity, or to offer any indignity, violence, abuse, or injury to any other person whatsoever. So anyway, that means the civil magistrate should not be discriminating based on someone's religion or irreligion, and use the power of the state to do that. All right, so this first part's interesting. This is where Hart presses these guys, the Christian nationalists. Do they want to keep Jews, Roman Catholics, and Lutherans out of their Christian nation that they want to start?
And Quakers and Lutherans out of your ideal Christian
assemblies, assuming ecclesiastical assemblies applies to that kind of situation. But that's not quite the concession that I think you're making it out to be, Daryl, where we've plopped down this sort of 20th century post 40.
No, I'm not going to the. No, you guys keep beating spirituality of the church guys up with you've departed from Knox and Calvin and Winthrop, and you guys are not standing.
So when Hart's talking about spirituality of the church, the Christian nationalists mock Christians who say, no, the church isn't a visible entity, mainly that the government should protect and promote by force of law, and Christian doctrine should be promoted. No, the church is spiritual. It's an invisible body that's made up and spread out. No, it needs to be a visible, tangible thing that's actually backed by the state. That's what he means when he says, you people criticize the spirituality of the church people.
Standing with Knox and Calvin and Winthrop either. So no. So you want to keep Jews and Roman Catholics and Quakers and Lutherans out of your ideal Christian society?
I think it'd be certainly, you have to say, if you believe in a Christian commonwealth and the tradition, including the guys you just cited and many more, that's certainly permissible.
No, I'm saying, what do you want? I'm not talking about permissibility. I'm saying you think that American Presbyterians sort of lost connection to those old guys, and you're holding them up as the standard by which to judge the liberal Presbyterians that have gone afterwards, the David Frenches and everybody else. But now you're sort of just saying, oh, it's kind of permissible. But
no, it's permissible and good, but that doesn't mean it's everywhere.
So you think heretics should be?
Okay, so, and this is a criticism of I'll just give these two guys. It's all theory, and actually Brad really nails them to the wall. It's all theory. So they just straight up asked, in the Christian nation you want to build, will you exclude Jews, Roman Catholics, Lutherans? And this guy's like, well, if you're going to talk about a Christian nation, you really have to have the discussion on whether you're going to have Jews, Roman Catholics, and Lutherans not be just second-class citizens or excluded completely or, banished from the nation. I mean, that's what this guy said. Now, listen to the next question. Do you think heretics should be executed? Okay, so this is what Daryl's about to listen to their response to heretics being executed.
Executed.
I think they can be. And
so that's the answer. So they can be. So this guy, Timon Klein, would gladly stand and watch a heretic be executed and would think that he's doing God's will and think that that's a good thing. Now notice, they can be, depending on the circumstance. It just depends. See, these guys like to dwell in theory. See, it's fun to write a book or do thought experiments about Christian nationalism. But when it comes to specifics, these guys hide behind, it just depends on the circumstance, and then they'll wax eloquent about all this stuff. You're kind of seeing, it's only 8 minutes in, and you're seeing that I don't like most of this Christian nationalism stuff. I think it's a bunch of guys going around selling books, and appealing to the right-winger MAGA crowd to try to get, they're just riding the bandwagon, and, it makes for good clicks and views and likes and selling books. But if you actually got power, if you actually got governmental power in your hands, Timon Klein, you would gladly stand and consent to the execution of heretics. So let's see what he says.
It depends on the context, and it depends on, according to prudence, what the magistrate is able to do.
It sounds like you're
this is very standard political theory in this regard. I mean, this is a lot of why we appeal to the guys we're appealing to.
Executing heretics is standard political philosophy.
Brad. So this is where Brad jumps in. Executing heretics. In these guys' mind, that's just standard. There's just standard political theory. It's just standard. What do you mean? You execute heretics.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, Turretin, of
Plato.
course.
I mean,
Okay. We don't
Yeah,
have a time. Do we need a time machine? We need what I call the prot tub time machine, and then this works. But we are where we are, and I don't find the last section of this paragraph does not support the execution of heretics by the prince, whatever that is.
I don't see anywhere that it negates it, so it would be permissible.
Right. So one of the things
So it would be permissible. So I mean, I gotta give the guy credit. He wants to. He thinks we should be executing heretics in a Christian nation. So he wants to go back to Spanish Inquisition. He wants to go back to Bloody Mary. He wants to go back to Servetus. He wants to go back to all those things. Publicly hanging heretics, banishing heretics. Of course, their definition of a heretic, right? These very, in my opinion, legalistic, right-wing, extreme reform guys, many of them, hardcore Sabbatarians who think you're sinning against God if you're a single mother and you have to support your family and you have to work on the Sabbath. Oh my God. If you enter their church, you would be banished because your wife doesn't just have babies at your house and not work a job. Like, does your wife work? Yeah. Oh, we question your masculinity. You really want those guys deciding what's heresy? You really want those guys in charge of that? Anyway.
I wanted to do tonight, and of course I can show it in Stephen's book very easily. The goal of all this, at least for Stephen's concept, is a heresy punishing Christian prince. And so if you want that, and
so Stephen's got a big grin. I don't know if you can see it. I'm sure he gets this all the time because he just blatantly wrote it in his book. And it's the part of his book that is the most ridiculous. But, he's probably getting sick of being asked about it. But, dude, are you saying that you would be cheering on and you would say heartily amen as the floor is kicked out from under the person and they're hung for being a heretic or burned at the stake? Or maybe you'd be more humane and do, modern form of execution. That's what's, and now, is this the part where, no, that's later in the video. I think it's that Timon guy's like, well, if the reason you guys don't like the idea of people being executed is you're just a soft liberal. He actually says that at one point. All right, let's keep going.
The ability to discriminate or to not to disfavor or not privilege those who are unorthodox, Roman Catholics, Jews, you name it. If that's what people want, that's what you guys are offering. I mean,
I'm sorry. I respond to that. I tried to write a systematic, coherent Christian political theory, which means that I will detail what a political leader can do in principle, what is permissible for him to do. And so I made an argument that, yes, for arch heretics, it is permissible at times for execution or banishment or these things. Okay. And that's permissibility. That's not like I want to enact utopia and start rounding up, Baptists or something like I see on Twitter every day. It's permissible.
So it's just permissible, guys. He's just writing a theory. It's not that it has to be this way. It's just a theory, and it's permissible. Come on, man. Like, you're just take a stand and say that you want to see heretics executed, and that's a really twisted, weird thing to me. But it is what it is, and that's what these guys. That's what Brad's pushing back on these guys. Like, this is your position. You want a heresy punishing Christian prince that can banish and execute who you consider heretics. Now, notice he said arch heretics, so it's only the arch heretics, maybe, not just the average run of the mill heretics.
In terms of the American context, for a long time, that would not be appropriate, and I don't think it'd be appropriate now. I have friends who are Roman Catholics, and they no longer want to, submit us to the papacy politically anymore. So I'm very willing to work with them, and even in a creating Christian society. So I think there's just a failure to understand that I'm not like a post-millennial theonomist who lists the absolute rules of what a political leader must do or ought to do. It's may do, it's can do, given the circumstances and prudence. So you'll see me use can and may throughout that. I never say must or ought to. I do think they ought to promote true religion.
So it's just so. First of all, he did clarify, in the American context, he doesn't think it's a good idea. Okay, good. Secondly, okay, the whole I don't say you have to do it, but can, you may, you might, you don't. I never say must. I don't lay out a thing. Well, dude, what are we supposed to do with your writing? It's just a thought It's just an interesting thought experiment that we can sit in a chair and use our imagination like a fantasy book for a while and then snap back to real life. None of your things that you theorize should be applied to real life. I mean, it's just, that's where these guys lose all traction. When they're asked to give specifics, they don't have them. They just go, well, it's permissible, maybe. So let's see what Hart does.
But how you promote true religion is different in different contexts, depending on the demographic diversity, religious diversity, and all sorts of things. So this is just a matter of laying out your political principles and then looking at the characteristics on the ground and saying, how do we achieve the ends sought in political society, which I think is a greater good than just your temporal, make sure they have their fat in their bellies, but also they are spiritually fed as well. How, given the circumstances, how do you enact a set of policies that would conduce to that end? And it'll be different in different places, which again, this idea it's recognized all the way back in Althusius's Politica, that a magistrate, he's opposing the Roman Catholics who want to just kill everyone because they're heretics. And he's saying, wait, okay, you have to be prudent in how you're going to steer this ship. Otherwise, I think he uses that metaphor. But anyway, so that, again, I think it's not fair to take what I say is permissible and then saying I'm saying it must be that.
All right. So is this just a thought experiment?
No, it's established. It's a matter of doing political philosophy. I don't know how,
no, but
it's just political philosophy. I don't know what it's not.
It's a good point. So it's just a thought experiment. We shouldn't take what you're saying seriously. It's just, in my thoughts of how I think a Christian nation should be.
I'm not a post-mill, I don't want to.
Stephen, please be honest. Please be honest. Is it permissible then to depart from Calvin, Knox, and Winthrop on political theory and not be called an Anabaptist?
I think if you think that the church is an alternative society, that it's something that's the sole separate, redemption is only within this very limited sphere, and you don't see the civil society as something that can order and contribute indirectly to that, then yeah, that's an Anabaptist assumption. So I don't know,
I'm saying, is it permissible for a Presbyterian to depart from Calvin and Knox and Winthrop? You want to talk about what's permissible. You're only doing political theory, but then in your arguments sometimes about history, it's like, oh, you guys departed. You've given up on the Protestant magisterial tradition. Oh, you've become liberals. Oh, you've become David French. So you're not really talking about something that's permissible at that point. You're using the past and what's the right way against the wrong way. And it's not merely what's permissible at that point. You're doing rhetorical tap dancing the way Timon did on the Reformed Forum podcast. Let's have some more Jimmy Cagney.
No, it's if you deny the conceptual possibility of a Christian nation, okay, if you don't think nations can be Christian, which I'm assuming you believe that. I apologize.
How can nations be Christian? Didn't we try that in Europe for a long time? Did that really work out? You had nations that claimed to be Christian. Were they Christian nations? Yeah. See, I don't agree with that. And then Hart's point is, well, if you deny that, you label people liberals and Anabaptists and you attack them, and you imply that they should even lose their credentials as a Presbyterian minister, which is where this is headed. That's what Hart's worried about. Like, well, so okay, you can talk about permissibility of executing heretics, but is it permissible to depart from some of the political theory put out by someone like John Calvin or John Knox? Oh, well, blah, 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 and he doesn't answer it directly. So that's what Daryl's trying to get him to do. Okay, now let's skip ahead here. There's this interesting little discussion about the sword and Peter, Pilate, Jesus. Let's see. A few timestamps here. 57:10 is where it starts.
This was good for society. So I don't think I disagree with you. But I think what I don't want to do is I don't want to go this extra step and say that it's actually biblical, right?
But
I don't want to.
But Jesus was also against Peter. Peter took out the sword in John 18 and lopped off the guy's ear. He was probably a bad shot. Otherwise, he would have taken off his head. And Jesus would have had to put Malchus's head back together. And Jesus, what does he say? That's not the way my kingdom's coming. And what is the nation state? It has a monopoly on the legitimate use of force. And Jesus right there says, that's not the way it happens.
But he is still. So I think we're in Passion Tide. And so when we do the reading, you have this interaction between Pilate and Christ. And so when Pilate says, are you king of the Jews? And Jesus basically says, as you say, like, that's not Jesus winking. It's not like, yeah, I'm kind of king. He is actually king. And so I think, like, we have to deal with that. That's a historical fact. Jesus was actually king of the Jews.
But Miles, the point has to do with whether the church and the kingdom comes through force or through the proclamation of the word.
Thank you. Exactly right. So these guys, Stephen Wolfe and Timon Klein, they think that Christianity can be advanced by the power of the state. It's just unbelievable that this is even a movement in the United States of America, but it is. This post-liberalism, it's called. We're going to see that in a moment, which post-liberalism is on both sides. This is the right-wing version. We need to punish heretics and promote a Christian nation. Then there's left-wing post-liberalism. We're going to have hate speech laws, and we're going to jail people for, engaging in hate speech, and et cetera, et cetera. Both sides want to do the same thing. They just want to use the force of government to promote their worldview. And I think Hart's exactly right. Jesus clearly said, this is not how my kingdom comes. It doesn't come by the sword. And it's interesting, Miles, didn't he say my kingdom is not of this world to Pilate? Yeah, he said he was the king. And then it's interesting, in the Apostle Paul's writings, he had ample opportunity to say that Christians who become into the civil magistrate should use the sword to enforce Christianity. He doesn't say that. It's this, in Romans 13. But let's continue.
That's what Jesus and the apostles understood. It took the apostles a long time to understand that, because they thought it was going to be David's kingdom, and there was going to be another a monarch like that who would execute God's justice. That's not what Jesus was doing. And then 3 centuries later, Constantine comes, and then you can do the sword. But I think it's a very difficult situation for any Christian to say that the kingdom is advanced through force, through war, through police power.
I don't think the proposition is to advance the church by force.
I'm saying the kingdom.
So I'm not aware.
The kingdom of Jesus Christ come.
I mean, Daryl, you're the historian here, but I'm not aware of any reformer who believed in executing heretics, who believed that the kingdom of God was advanced by the sword. In fact, they believed the opposite. They believed that it was achieved through proclamation of the word and through persuasion. So that's how directly the gospel and the kingdom is advanced. Nevertheless, before we go to church, I mean, this is just basic stuff. Before we go to church, we get a good night's rest. We have a nice cup of coffee in the morning. We have a nice hearty breakfast. And why do we do that? So that our body is prepared to attend that service so that our soul can be fed. And so there are earthly supports that occur that you do, we all do, and I'm sure you encourage your congregation to do, so that they can show up to worship with a body that is not a hindrance to their soul in worship. Okay, so there is a relationship of temporal to spiritual, and we are all very willing, and in fact think it's wise and prudent to order that to the higher good. And the same is going to be true within the earthly realm, even though it's not the food in your belly that's going to feed your soul. Nevertheless, it's an important ancillary condition or supporting condition for you to receive that.
Okay, Stephen, that's really great. And so he's basically using that analogy to say that the civil government and the government that has the right of force, their job is not to do things about the soul, but the body. Well, what does that mean? What's the application? Of course, he has none. It's a thought experiment once again. Now, this next thing is, because remember, we were talking about, executing heretics. And the Christianity is spread by the word. However, he always says a however, because we got to give the government power in their system to enforce religion. Let's see. This is an interesting question. I forget who asks it, but is the Constitution a failed document? And is free speech, is the First Amendment untenable? So let's see. 104.14 is where that starts. Let's listen to this one.
Was in light of that.
That's my next question.
Right, but I'm assuming I
US
have to hold to the
Constitution a failed document. Many people say that online now. Is the First Amendment untenable, ungodly, obsolete?
You guys are shadow boxing, like none. You're not talking. No,
that's an issue that people care about. This issue: are we going to have the First Amendment or not?
That no one's talking about the First Amendment.
No, it's all no. If you can punish heresy and speech, we're talking about the First Amendment.
Stephen just mentioned how you do things for the body to protect the soul.
Yeah, but
that has implication for the First Amendment.
Yeah, but we do that. So we regulate racist speech. So what's the proposition then? So what we're doing is we're actually asking.
But some of us object to regulating racist speech. That seems to be a violation of the First Amendment.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if we're arguing. Are we arguing over a principle? Like nothing, because I don't know if anybody believes that there's no regulation on this. I don't know how that's an ontological possibility. So at some level,
Miles guy's a nice guy, but he kind of interrupts the debate because I want to hear what Stephen Wolf and Timon Klein have to say about the First Amendment. And he's like, well, you guys are just shadowboxing. Well, do they think that people who have heretical views should be put in jail and have their freedoms taken because of what they're saying? So they're engaging in heretical speech. Should they be put in jail? And he's not letting them answer the question.
Everybody believes there's some sort of limit. And so what we're debating is the degree to which our philosophy of history informs where we can kind of set this limit. Like no one believes in completely free speech. No one does. And so it sounds like what the debate is where is the appropriate limit, and to what degree is there religious influence on that limit?
The First Amendment is also about religious freedom, and that's all over these discussions.
A wonderful book by.
Okay, there was really no answer to that. Okay, next. I think this is where Hart talks about post-liberalism on both sides. 107.14.
And I see Stephen in that category. I see Timon, an American reformer, as post-liberal. I also see the integralist as post-liberal. I see Peter Lightheart and James Wood as post-liberal, and I see the Scottish National Party, which is about to pass an amazing hate speech law, as post-liberal. So to act like this is not really a big deal, or we're talking or shadow boxing, is actually not true, Miles. I think this is a serious issue. Free speech is under attack a lot of the places, and I think Stephen Wolf's book could be used to support suppression of free speech, which could penalize a lot of bad stuff that I don't like, but it could also penalize a lot of Christian stuff, which is happening.
So but the question is,
okay, so he's not letting Stephen speak again. I didn't like that part. I like you, Miles, but I don't. Most of the time, he just prevented the debate from happening instead of facilitating it. But anyway, here's what he was mentioning. Scotland. This is March 21st. Scotland to launch new hate speech law on April Fool's Day that will jail people for up to 7 years. So these hate speech laws. So that's what he was talking about. So what's liberalism in the positive sense? It's what the American Constitution was based on. It's freedom of speech, freedom of religion, having a society where people have freedoms to believe how they want, worship how they want, and not being compelled by the government, and say what they want. A free press, a free society. We're moving to a post-liberal society on the left and the right, where censorship on the left and censorship on the right, and it's wanting to use the government to do these things. All right, so let's see. We only have 2 more timestamps. Here's one on ethnicity. 1955. This is another problem with these guys. Whenever they start talking about ethnicity, it gets very dicey. And they want a white society, most of them. They want they're Christian nationalists are called white supremacists by the left, sometimes for good reason, sometimes for very good reason. All right, let's listen to this part.
But I don't think that's the proposition.
Well, okay, that's what I'm reading in the book, that ethnicity is very important, and that privileging the Christian religion over all others is the goal. How do we get there?
Why isn't it the proposition, Miles?
Well, because I mean, as I've understand Stephen's book, he's basically asking to get away. I think that Stephen, you can correct.
Yeah, let Stephen tell what the basis of his book is, man. It's so anyway. That was a frustrating part of this video.
Me if I'm wrong. The essential, I think, failing that Stephen has identified, what he sees as a failing, is a constant universalization of everything. And so he's sort of trying to reclaim something particular, because that which is particular is that which is most likely to be embodied, and that's actually how you will kind of eventually order society. You can't order society on universals. Is that fair, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, that's good enough. Okay. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, that is pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I read in your book, and I think that's, we read it in my parish, and Stephen, some of the people in my parish, and so that's, I think.
Okay, wasn't really answered. Okay, yeah, listen to the whole thing if you're really interested. Okay, this was an interesting part. So this is where Wolf kind of lays out his thesis of Christian nationalism and why the government should be in the business of regulating speech, punishing heretics, banishing heretics, etc., etc. Making certain religions not able to participate in the society in the same way as Christians can, etc., etc. 125.08. Oh, it's hard to get exactly where you want to get here. Let's just start here.
What is being constructed there?
It means
it recognizes the existence of nations, but I agree with Daryl. There's nothing that requires or extols or prioritizes, and I think that's the problem with Christian nationalism. It prioritizes the nation when the church is the thing. The church is the thing. So let me
Right.
read from
Well, can I go?
Hebrews. Just a minute. Hebrews 13, 2 verses. Back to the abrogating the Jewish nation. So let us go out to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we do not have a lasting city, but we are seeking the city which is to come, not the nation that is to come, not the nations that are to come. There is an otherworldly focus with and people don't like that.
So I think I mean in the book I say this so many times in the book. The one thing I do repeat over and over and over in the book is that I'm not trying to bring heaven down to earth. I'm not immanentizing the eschaton. I'm not trying to make turn temporal life into spiritualized life. I say over and over and over that you order the temporal to the eternal, you order the civil to the spiritual, you order the earthly to the heavenly. I say this over and over and over because yes, the Christian life is this sort of pilgrimage to a higher celestial city. But
so how do you order something, Stephen, without using force and taking away people's rights under the U.S. Constitution? How do you do that? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but how do you bring order? What mechanisms do you use to do that? And we're saying that there needs to be the regenerating work of the Holy Spirit through the preaching of the word that makes people willing to obey a Christian morality and to create a society that is ordered around Christian morality. But you're saying that we could have a bunch of unregenerate people who the state is making them order their temporal life toward the eternal and doing it through threat of force, right? Isn't that what Christian nationalism is? That's what Brad and I think it is. So let's let him finish this point he's making about the temporal versus the eternal.
What comes with that are the temporal supports to aid you in that on that pilgrimage. And so just like the family, like if you guys want to say that only the church is this thing that we call, a colony of heaven or whatever you want to call it, then you're excluding the family from that. That means you can't have Christian families. You can't have Christian families. If you can't have a Christian nation, it's likely you can't have a Christian family. So then something went wrong. A Christian nation is simply a nation that arranges itself such that it encourages people to transcend the nation.
So arranges itself. How do you arrange something? Who's doing the arranging? Who's given the power to do the arranging? See, that's the thing. This sounds really good. And the other thing is, Paul says a lot about Christian families. He says nothing about Christian nations. So he talks about how a Christian family is supposed to operate. Not anything. And where does the Apostle Paul teach how we should set up a Christian nation?
In other words, to look to the heavenly nation, the heavenly Jerusalem. And so that's all I'm saying. If you guys treat me as like a post-millennialist or reconstruct, whatever it is, then yeah, that would be false. That's not what I actually don't think. I think the gospel is a lot less political than you might realize. I think the gospel is mainly about eternal life. I think then that politics recognizes the means to salvation, the means to achieve, or attain eternal life, and then it orders people given its powers to that. Just like
it orders people given its powers to that. What in the world does that mean practically? Like zero practicality. So let's shift over. Okay, I'm almost done with this. I wanted to. So the win. So okay, let's shift over here. Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson just made an appearance on Tucker Carlson. Now, I like when Doug Wilson talks about Christian nationalism way more than anybody else. Okay, the way he presents it, the way that he talks about it. They put the rest of this video behind a paywall, so I'm not going to sit here and harshly criticize Doug Wilson for how he answers Tucker's question here, because Tucker asks him the next question. And I mean, putting it behind the paywall is getting somebody like me, because I do want to see how he answers the next question. But listen to what Tucker asked. So Doug Wilson is on Tucker Carlson recently, and he's explaining what Christian nationalism is. And listen to Tucker. Tucker asks a similar question. What about the rights of somebody who's not a Christian in your Christian nationalistic nation that you want? What is the status of their rights? And Wilson's answer is nothing. He talks about the code enforcement of building a house, and he tries to be cheeky like Doug Wilson's good at and talk about the government being in your bedroom. But anyway, so that's the problem. Even Doug Wilson, when he's asked very specific practical questions about the implementation, doesn't give actual answers. He just kind of dances around it and doesn't give the full blown, this is what would happen to a non-Christian in a Christian nation that I would be in charge of.
Christian nationalism does not imply forced conversion.
It does not.
Or a reduction in the rights of non-Christians.
No, it's an expansion of the rights of non-Christians.
Oh, so it's an so a Christian nation would expand the rights of non-Christians. That's an interesting statement. How so, Doug Wilson? How will the rights be expanded?
I believe an average. My standard joke picked up somewhere is if I were president, and what a glorious 3 days that would be. we would get a lot done in those days. But if I were
I wouldn't want Doug Wilson to be our president. Just to be clear,
control of this, I believe the average non-believer would not know what to do with all the additional liberty he would have.
Yeah,
sounds great, right? Does he ever flesh it out? Maybe behind the paywall he does, but he certainly doesn't hear. Listen.
Okay. I believe.
Can you give me an example of the liberties non-Christians would gain under?
Okay, let's see how he answers this. So thank you, Tucker. That's exactly what I want to know. Can you give me an example of these expanded liberties that non-Christians would have in your Christian nation?
Such a structure.
How many of our chains have we gotten used to? Right.
Too many.
Too many.
Okay, nice slogan. What are the chains? Okay.
So one of the common things that the people who are trying to scare people with Christian nationalism, like we're going to go back to the Handmaid's Tale type of thing, are trying to spook us with that sort of thing. And they say, we need to keep the government out of our bedrooms. Keep the government out of the bedroom. Well,
this is just another Doug Wilson pithy thing, man. It has no substance to it whatsoever. But here's how he's answering the question of what would be the expanded rights for non-Christians in Doug Wilson's Christian nation. Listen to this.
I had the privilege a number of years ago building my own house, and I know exactly how many screws the government required to be in the sheetrock in my bedroom, how big the windows had to be for egress in my bedroom, how thick the sheetrock had to be in my bedroom. What do you mean keep the government out of my bedroom? I can't remove the mattress tag from the mattress because the government is in my bedroom.
Literally.
Right. So one of the things that would happen is that you would have a great deal more practical liberty, as opposed to the kind of liberty that the leftists want you to have.
Okay, so his example is he would relax building codes so that you didn't have to build a house according to a certain standard that makes it, acceptable and structurally sound. Is so non-Christians, welcome to your great Christian nation of Doug Wilson. You will have less building codes if you want to build your own house, and you can leave your mattress tag on. I'm sorry. Maybe he does a better job behind the paywall, but come on. Like that's your example. And then listen to and then of course what Doug Wilson does is he'll throw that out there, sounds real pithy, and then he goes right back to, well, we really know the problem are these evil, wicked liberals. And that's the other thing about some of these people, man. Like it's the us versus them dynamic is it's similar to the political dynamic in our country. And they've embraced it. They've embraced the MAGA movement, but are trying to incorporate it into a patriarchal, post-millennial Christian thing, where it's this us versus them, and these wicked people aren't people that need to be regenerated and have the gospel preached to them. They need to be brought into subjection in a Christian nation.
the kind of liberties that you can exercise in a 6x8 prison cell. You can read porn in a prison cell, right? You can have dope smuggled into you in a prison cell. You can get high in a prison cell. You can be
but may I ask though? I mean, there's no question that the right, as a general broadly.
Yeah, thanks for interrupting, because I don't know that had nothing to do with the question. What rights will be expanded for non-believers in Doug Wilson's Christian Nation? There was not even it wasn't even answered. And then we go right back on the attack of the liberals. I mean,
Broadly speaking, offers a vision of greater personal liberty than the left, which is totalitarian. I think that's pretty clear. But why? What about Christianity would inspire you to offer more liberty, as opposed to like your dedication to Hayek?
Okay.
Why Christianity?
behind the paywall. See, there it is. Okay, so you got to subscribe to Tucker Carlson Network to get to that. Okay, well, last one. We'll wrap up with this. I want to show you this guy Timon's disdain. 135.55. When they're talking about, Hart is going to give the example of, do you want to go back to the Massachusetts Bay Colony? Is that how you want to order this Christian nation of yours that you guys are theorizing about? And this is where, Timon makes the comment about, we're just soft liberals if we don't think heretics should be executed. That's why we don't like the idea, because we're just soft liberals. All of us soft liberals who are anti-execution of heretics. That's our problem. All right, let's listen to this.
Conditions of the first century to yourself because this is the only just way to live? Or should you order yourself as a Christian people because it's justice to God and justice to man and it's for everyone's good?
And if you're going to order yourself, maybe you don't use the model of the Roman Empire and persecute Christians or other religious groups. Sorry?
I'm not talking about persecution.
But I'm talking about Massachusetts, which did persecute.
It depends. It depends on how you understand persecution.
Well, I think Roger Williams was a Baptist in good standing, and he was not exactly welcome. And again, Quakers and Quakers were
Roger
killed.
Williams is a strange
Quakers
example
were
to use because
Roger
Quakers
Williams
is kind of nuts. Yeah, I mean, Quakers were executed after they were banished multiple times and asked to stay away and when they got up on the scaffolding, were asked again if they would promise to stay away because this is how we're doing things here. Rhode Island is available. They said no, and so of course they executed them because it's the 17th century. It's more brutal than many of us could probably handle at this point because we're soft liberals.
Oh, but okay, all right. So if you,
but Timon could handle it. He could handle putting a Quaker on a scaffolding and giving them one last chance to recant or leave. And, Stephen Wolf has a little smirk on his face. So he's a man. Timon Klein's a man. He's a man's man. Hang heretics. Hang Quakers. Put them on the scaffolding. Give them a couple chances to be banished. That's fine. But if they keep coming back, hang them. Okay. And we're just soft liberals because we can't handle the way it was back then. Okay.
You have a daughter one day. If you have a daughter, don't time machine travel back to Massachusetts, because if she says or does the wrong thing, she may be drugged behind a wagon naked for 2 or 3 days.
No, that's not. You're caricaturing the.
No, I'm not. I've read the book Albion Seed, the careful work of cultural history, just the 4 migrations in the U.S. And if you want to go back to Massachusetts, you go. Yeah, I don't think we want to do that.
It's not as simple as doing or saying the wrong thing. I mean, there's plenty of examples where you have open dissenters within a congregation. It will take them over a decade to kind of deal with the situation because they're trying to be pastoral and bring them along and encourage them, to conform to true doctrine, of course. But this doesn't mean any of those things were wrong in principle. And Roger Williams is just a strange.
So none of that stuff was wrong in principle. Okay. So there you have it. This is probably going to be my only foray into Christian nationalism. I just wanted to put something on there. Next time we'll continue with Romans. I think by the time you hear this, I will already have released the Romans 6 final part of the Romans 6 debate. And then I got another interesting video on Reformed theology that I wanted to go over. That had, what's his name? Jonathan Hatfield. And he had something about a guy who wrote a book against Calvinism, and there's a lot of interesting stuff to respond to in that video. So hope you like this one. Thanks for joining me today. And I am not a Christian nationalist, just to be on the record. That probably was very clear. I think that the gospel is the power that will, once it gets a hold of someone's mind and heart. I agree with James White on this. I mean, he's a post-millennialist, and he's probably more for this than I am, but he would say the only way any of this stuff that these guys are proposing is even possible is there has to be a massive revival. There has to be a massive revival where hundreds of millions of people become Christians, regenerated, and then they by their choice, because they've been regenerated and have the Spirit of God, want to live in a quote-unquote Christian nation. But you can't just have the few impose this on the many, and America has never been like that. America was founded the opposite of that idea. And I live in Pennsylvania, which William Penn was one of the people who welcomed the Quakers and welcomed everyone who had there was lots of religious liberty in Pennsylvania that wasn't available in Massachusetts or on the East Coast in the early founding of America. But anyway, thanks for joining me. Like, share, subscribe, and see you next time. God bless.